Ladies and gentlemen, hope everyone is keeping safe. Welcome to the first virtual conference on building resilient and sustainable systems in the age of pandemics. This is the first of a series of dialogues on agricultural value chain linkages to improve food systems in Sri Lanka. I'm Chaturga, and on behalf of the organizers, I would like to thank you for joining our discussion today. This dialogue is held by the International Fund for Agricultural Development, World Food Programme, and Food and Agriculture Organization with the support of Institute of Policy Studies of Sri Lanka. We are very pleased to have the Government of Sri Lanka and the United Nations Resident Coordinator to provide opening remarks. This first virtual dialogue will showcase how stakeholders are working to advance agricultural value chains and their linkages to improve food systems in Sri Lanka. The main virtual dialogue is to offer a platform for collective learning, knowledge exchange, and identification of both gaps and areas for collective focus. This dialogue is a part of a series of events leading up to the Food Systems Summit in 2021. It will offer an opportunity to discuss how to support policy interventions that can deliver inclusive and sustainable impact for the rural poor and how these contribute to national pathways for sustainable food systems. The main outcome of this dialogue allows us to exchange experiences and learn about measures to transform the food systems to reach zero hunger by 2030. The policy paper will be developed afterwards, which can inform best practices, policy formulation, planning, and coordination. To facilitate the proceedings, I would like to remind you of the protocols of today's event. All participants are kindly requested to be on mute with the exception of moderators and the panelists during the course of the session, and questions can be raised either through the chat space or by raising the blue hand during the Q&A sessions. While seeking your active participation, I request you to adhere to the set protocols and time to make this event a success. Thank you. On that note, let me warmly welcome the distinguished speakers, discussants, and all participants from several important organizations to this event. We are hopeful that today's dialogue will offer an opportunity to discuss how we can better work together as partners to deliver inclusive and sustainable solutions for the rural poor and contribute to national pathways for sustainable food systems. Next will be the opening remarks from the government. Mr. Kumarasiri is Director General of National Planning Department under the Ministry of Finance since January 2020. Before taking up his present position, he worked as an additional secretary to the Ministry of National Policies and Economic Affairs since 2016 and has been holding numerous high-level positions in the government of Sri Lanka for more than 26 years. Prior to joining the government service, he worked as an assistant lecturer at the University of Colombo for 3 years, and currently he is a visiting lecturer at the University of Kelaniya and University of Colombo. He was engaged in conducting research within the government sector as well as jointly with the United Nations agencies, and most notably the UN World Food Programme, and has 4 publications to his credit. He received his first degree from University of Colombo, Sri Lanka, his postgraduate diploma in Egypt, and master's degree in development studies from the ISS in the Netherlands. He has worked with many United Nations agencies since 2004 and worked as director for United Nations World Food Programme assisted projects for more than 12 years. To deliver the opening remarks on behalf of the Government of Sri Lanka, let me cordially invite Mr. Kumarasiri, Director General of the Department of National Plan. Over to you.
Thank you very much for giving a brief introduction about me. Good evening Ms. Hanaa Singer, UN Resident Coordinator, Dr. Tarek, Country Director, Sri Lanka and Nepal, International Fund for Agriculture Development, IFAD, and Ms. Brenda Barton, representative of the Country Director, World Food Programme, and Dr. Sun, representative for Sri Lanka and Maldives for FAO, Dr. Ajanta from the Ministry of Agriculture, other participants from the various agencies, ministries, departments, public institutions, and also from the official from the UN organization, and also from the official of the IPS, consultants and the resource person, ladies and gentlemen. I take this opportunity to thank organizers to invite me for the initial introductory speech, and very much pleased to join this first virtual dialogue, building resilience and sustainable food system in the age of pandemic today, and sincerely thank the WFP, IFAD and FAO for hosting this to explore options for contributing to the national pathway for sustainable food system. I hope this first dialogue will serve as a platform for knowledge sharing and to discuss how inclusive models for climate and response to COVID-19 can ensure resilience to stallholders, agribusinesses, and empowering youth and women in a long-term sustainability, providing adequate tools for food security. As you all know, COVID-19 is spreading all over the world, despite the fact that the whether country is rich or poor. Every country is of the world are adversely affected. Situation in Sri Lanka is also very much affected. In this context, the theme of the forum, resilience building and sustainable food system, is timely important. And as you all well aware, unless otherwise, if we fail to address these issues of resilience buildings and the strengthening the food system, the disaster on each nation in the context of food security would be much greater than the impact of the COVID. As such, the impact of COVID, strategies for resilience building, and the methodology for deploying the sustenance of the food system need to be discussed at a large and among other nations. I should not say here, it is obvious that the production in each country has been reduced. Value chain got paralyzed in some extent. SME halted. This made an economic loss within and outside the production entities, creating avenue for social issues. The cross-border trade on the other largely limited, remaining as important standing on its own, exploring the potentials. There are many, but that is what it is, nutshell the consequences of COVID on our rural agriculture and agro-based economy. I would like to brief you about our food system in Sri Lanka. The agriculture in Sri Lanka continue to be sector critical to economy and has been important drive of poverty reduction and social development. More than 70% of the rural population solely depend on directly or indirectly for agriculture-related activities. About 1.6 million smallholders farmers operate on average less than 2 hectares and contribute 80% of the total annual food production. The entire sector has been affected starting from the production base throughout the entire value chain until the end point of the market network. All actors in the value chain has been affected, influencing on operational efficiencies leading to profit margin. Therefore, I could say all the issues, including recent COVID-19 pandemic, are a wake-up call that has highlighted the need for holistic approaches to both address the shock brought by the pandemic disaster, but also to address the vulnerabilities of our unsustained food system. Ladies and gentlemen, irrespective of the challenges we are faced with, we must move forward. As policymakers, we must view this as a precaution to move into a new innovative approach towards more resilient and sustainable system. The government policy framework, Vistas of Prosperity and Splendor, and Budget 2021 are aiming to transform the country on inclusive growth development. Within this framework, strengthening food value chain and building resilience and sustainable food system are expected to play an important role in improving the productivity, strengthening the agriculture sector, and achieving sustainable development. The impact of COVID on entire agriculture sector and uncertainty of livelihood engagement of people in the sector, the government intention has already been focused to keep the supply line for food, ensure that the farmers continue to have access to input and service required, and also prevent primary production and workers all along the value chain. Accordingly, the accelerated food production program as an important substitution has been implemented since last cultivating season, Yala 2020, for selected 15 crops and additional 40,000 hectares cultivated during Yala season 2020. The required inputs, planting material, seeds, fertilizer, and required technology are provided for farmers on concessionary terms. This program has been continued for upcoming season as well. The infrastructure development in the entire value chain of food commodity need to be further strengthened. In particular, among the actors in the value chain, improving of storage facilities, including cold storage, provision of transport, modernization of research, as well as regulatory bodies, good marketplaces, modern of pack houses, and improvement of collecting and storing centers are most vital. The innovation of new technology for productivity improvements and change of growing culture of food crops is also important for increased production and productivity. The government is expecting assistance, particularly grant assistance on these endeavors. Number of development partners, including UN agencies, are supporting Sri Lanka on different disciplines to ensure sustainability of food system for achieving national food and nutrition security. These initiatives range from highly soft-side components such that awareness raising, food provision for vulnerable categories, nutrient fortification towards the long-term and more sustainable infrastructure development interventions. The country is about to complete this detailed food security assessment with the support of the World Food Programme to further aspiration of the level of food security and also to identify the area which need intervention in the existing food system. I strongly believe that the finding will help us to formulate the policy strategies in the agriculture sector, particularly addressing the issues which are not addressed, still in maintaining and increasing the level of production distribution with highest attention on the equity and the sustainability. I must reiterate that the ensuring food security and creating sustainable food system are challenging ahead of us, all nations. The Agenda 2030 has also given high priority for the same, and it's implied the importance of this having dedicated goal for the same. Therefore, cooperation among nations in important and also sharing experience and good practices will also deserve greater importance to drive this concern. Thank you very much for listening for this my speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kumarasiri. Next will be the opening remarks from the United Nations. Ms. Hanaa Singer is the United Nations Resident Coordinator in Sri Lanka and leads the UN country team of 22 resident and non-resident UN agencies. She is a representative of the UN Secretary General in Sri Lanka. Ms. Singer has close to 3 decades of experience with UN, working across development and humanitarian contexts at various senior management and strategic leadership roles. Prior to Sri Lanka, held several leadership positions in UNICEF across the world, including the Associate Regional Director, UNICEF Geneva, Country Representative for UNICEF Syria, Nepal, Kazakhstan, and Azerbaijan. She has also led humanitarian programs in Burundi and Haiti and has coordinated UNICEF cross-border humanitarian operations to Afghanistan, from Central Asia and Northern Iraq from Turkey. She also provided technical support to UNICEF humanitarian programs in the North Caucasus and Balkans and Central Asia. The national of Egypt, Ms. Singer holds a master's degree in political sociology and a bachelor's degree in political science from the American University in Cairo, Egypt. She also holds a diploma in planning and management of decentralized development projects from Bradford University. Ms. Singer has engaged in academia and research in political sociology and international relations at the American University of Cairo and at the Sadat Academy for Management Sciences, Faculty of Political Science of Cairo University. She is the author and co-author of 2 publications on social change in the Middle East. Ladies and gentlemen, to give the opening remarks on behalf of the United Nations, let me invite Ms. Hanaa Singer, the UN Resident Coordinator for Sri Lanka.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the very extensive introduction. Highly appreciated. Good afternoon to all those of you joining us online for this very important discussion on the role of the UN organizations on food security and the value chain development. We are very, very honored and pleased to be joined by our government partners, and especially thank you, Mr. Kumarasiri, really for the excellent introduction and very rich information that you shared with us. So thank you very much for that. I would also like to acknowledge my United Nations colleagues who are working very closely on this particular issue in Sri Lanka, Dr. Tarek Kotb from the International Fund for Agricultural Development, Ms. Brenda Barton from WFP, and Dr. Sun from the Food and Agriculture Organization. Now, as just mentioned, and as of course we have been discussing this for quite a while, early this year, as the COVID-19 outbreak spread across the world, Sri Lanka really reacted quickly to mitigate the spread of the virus by going into a lockdown, while enacting also a similar measure recently at the start of the second wave of infections. As noted by Mr. Kumarasiri, the government took very timely steps to ensure minimum disruption of the agriculture food chain. As I was confined to my home, I have to say I considered it a luxury to have a safe and nutrition and affordable food delivered to my doorsteps. But I know, and we know, that not everyone was as privileged. It is natural for food supply chains to have disruptions at the onset of the crisis or of a crisis. Therefore, it is important that agri-supply chains are robust and resilient to recover fast and operate smoothly to ensure food travels from farm to the table uninterrupted for everyone, everywhere around Sri Lanka. The world now produces more than enough food to feed everyone. But at the same time, our agri-food systems are out of balance. Undernutrition, and at the opposite end, obesity, environmental degradation, food loss and waste, and a lack of security for food chain workers are only some of the issues that embody this imbalance. So Sri Lanka is facing a nutritional triple burden. How is that? This comprises of undernutrition, overnutrition, and micronutrient deficiencies. I'm sure my colleagues will explain this even better. Now, these nutritional challenges are further compounded by the loss of jobs and reduced incomes due to the socio-economic impact of COVID-19 pandemic, which is stretching and at times overwhelming the coping mechanisms of already vulnerable communities. Now, most of the food we eat from the farm from a farm that is operated by smallholder farmers or family farmers who grow our food amidst numerous hardships, including the impacts of climate change. And about 80% of Asian agriculture comes from smallholder farmers. Climate change has made weather patterns erratic, making it increasingly difficult to predict cropping seasons due to the sudden onset of droughts, floods, and even pests. Now, governments need to implement and invest in social protection policies and programs that ensure safe conditions and decent incomes for smallholders, farmers, and food chain workers, and adopt measures that can avoid as much as possible the economic disruption. And it is encouraging to see that the government of Sri Lanka's policy framework, as Dr. Kumarasiri referred to, the framework of the National Policy Framework Vistas of Prosperity and Splendor 2020 has proposed several long-term measures to facilitate food system transformation and improve the long-term resilience of food systems in the country. These measures, which are included in an overarching agriculture policy of Sri Lanka, call on promoting both the diversity of crops and a strategic collaboration of all those who participated in agriculture market value chains in order to make these more efficient. The UN agencies and programs are working, as you all know, very closely in partnership with the national and international organizations, research centers, professional associations on food safety, quality, and nutrition, while providing what we usually do, providing scientific advice and developing relevant networks and sharing knowledge to tackle the food safety issues along the food chain. So today's dialogue is timely as we gear up to the Global 2021 UN Food System Summit, which has been announced by the Secretary General. This is part of a decade of action to achieve sustainable development goals by 2030. The United Nations as a whole and the 3 Rome-based agencies here today, which focus on food, nutrition, and in connection with 2030, the Sustainable Development Goal number 2, which is zero hunger, they absolutely stand ready, as they always were, but even more to support Sri Lanka to take bold new actions, to provide support to new solutions and strategies to transform food systems and to awaken how we all think, how we all behave, and how we all produce and consume. So today's first dialogue session is really timely step to discuss and share knowledge on how to transform the way in which food is produced, processed, traded, consumed, and wasted. It is vital to scale up innovation in agriculture while producing in a sustainable way for the people and the planet. I wish you a very productive dialogue. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Ms. Singer. We are about to start the introductory panel discussion for the day. Before proceeding to the introductory panel discussion, let me remind again the protocols of today's conference. All participants are kindly requested to be on mute with the exception of the country directors, moderators, and the panelists during the sessions. And questions can be raised either through the chat space or by raising the blue hand during the Q&A session. This discussion will be on role of United Nations organizations on food security and value chain development. To continue with the panel discussion, let me now hand over the proceedings to the moderator of this session, Mr. Kithmina Hewage, currently working as a research economist at the Institute of Policy Studies of Sri Lanka. Over to you, Kithmina.
Thank you, Chaturuga, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. and welcome to the introductory session on the virtual dialogue on building resilient and sustainable food systems in the age of pandemics. I'm sure none of you want to hear from me, and you would much rather hear from the experts on this subject. So I won't spend much time giving introductions. I'm joined here by an elite panel representing three of the major UN and international multilateral organizations that work in the space of food value chains in Sri Lanka. So let me introduce the three panelists, and then we will move on to the questions and then have a discussion. And I would like to remind everyone, as Chaturuga mentioned earlier, to please keep yourselves muted during the discussion. Once the initial conversation with all the panelists are done, I will direct questions that you have sent through the chat function of this call or on Facebook through the comments. I will direct them to the three panelists depending on which is more relevant to their work. So once again, thank you very much. And today I'm joined by Dr. Tarek Kotb, the Country Director for Sri Lanka and Nepal from the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD. Ms. Brenda Barton, the Representative and Country Director of the World Food Programme, the WFP, and Dr. Xuebing Sun, the Representative for Sri Lanka and Maldives for the Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN. I would like to remind the panelists to please keep your answers short so that we can take in more questions from the audience and then respond and have a more dynamic dialogue over the next half an hour or so. Dr. Tarek, let me start with you as the representative of IFAD. How does the focus on value chain development in Sri Lanka help? Because this entire conversation is about value chain development, but let's start off with a discussion about why value chain development is important. So how does it help value in terms of food delivery in Sri Lanka, and particularly in terms of delivering food to the poor?
Thank you. Greetings to everybody. I'm very happy actually to be with you today. Indeed, IFAD believes that the development of a value chain could significantly contribute to securing more food for the nation, especially the smallholder farmers, when they properly engage in value chains. People normally think of the value chain approaches as only commercialization-oriented approach. This is absolutely incorrect. We know that traditional agriculture beneficiaries are typically reluctant to move away from subsistence production, which they think it brings comfort to their food security. But global experience has proven that value chain development is not only about increasing production, but is primarily about increasing income from agriculture, especially when it targets smallholders farmers to increase their food purchasing power. Additional income can diversify household diets and reduce the risk of depending exclusively on their own production for food security. From this point of view, IFAD is currently supporting two projects in Sri Lanka that approach value chain development from different angles, in addition to another project to be launched next year with special attention to the dry lands. One of the ongoing projects is with the Ministry of Plantation Industries to help smallholders revitalize perennial crops, namely tea and rubber. And the second project is with the Ministry of Agriculture to help smallholders establish producer public-private partnerships for a wide variety of crops, including spices, good quality seeds, dairy products, and many more. Smallholders in general need better access to inputs, finance and market information, non-farm facilities such as roads and technologies that are facilitated when smallholders participate in organized cash crop production as part of the value chain. Our supported project on smallholder partnership, for example, provides very convincing cases for inclusive value chain development, which essentially helps to respond to food insecurity situations. Typical gaps in food systems have now been realized as opportunities, such as import restrictions, for example, temporary suspension, banning, and price controls that supposedly reduce potential returns and increase risks. Classic examples of products impacted by import restrictions are dairy products. Import is typically 30% consumption, and maize import is about 60% of the consumption. Changing these situations to opportunities, about 10,000 smallholder dairy farmers and 6,000 maize farmers have engaged in value chain projects with our credit and grant support, partially closing the food gap created by the restrictions. Can you see the great potential here? Relevant examples also for price controls are green grams, chickpeas, potatoes, onions, and dried peppers. With value chain projects, 3,700 smallholder producers have partnered with IFAD project to produce these crops in order to take advantage of the higher prices. In a nutshell, the value chain framework supports product flows with reasonable transaction cost through local and niche markets. In addition, this market strengthens the enabling environment to ensure the right incentives such as connectivity, capital subsidies, credit, technical inputs, and training for value chain actors who will ultimately support food security. Other essential supporting factors that we provide in a value chain system include agricultural extension services through the public sector, appropriate technologies such as micro-irrigation, greenhouses, hydroponic systems, storage facilities, last mile access roads, and importantly, access to finance. Let me stop here.
Thank you, Dr. Kotb. Let me follow up with that. And IFAD has been working in Sri Lanka for quite a while now. What are some of the challenges you have faced during projects with regards to trying to develop value chains in Sri Lanka?
Okay, I can tell you first today, lack of capacity of producers and promoters to identify profitable technological solutions to improve production, storage, packaging, and marketing. This is usually associated with the lack of advice on extension and business development at this level, especially when the promoters are very local and therefore they are not willing to take the risk of engaging in a formal partnership, agreements with the farmers, and so on and so forth. Here, the role of the state, financial institutions, and the insurers is crucial to provide a well-informed extension and business development service. Easy access to feasible financial products for both producers and promoters, and most importantly, a crop insurance, which is very essential for particular crops in particular agro environments. Examples of failing value chain projects, mostly due to these reasons, are moringa, seed chili, and seaweed. Second is the lack of strategic focus for food security, as it is not always possible for public sector to identify and facilitate strategic pathways to create positive interactions between food and cash crops production, where food for home consumption is preferred by the smallholder producers. For example, about 40% of legume farmers who were expected to diversify to turmeric value chain failed because the focus of the state extension service was more on legume production. Third, I think there's a particularity of some value chain commodities, which may require specific know-how, including particular care. However, some of these products are necessary for food security, and as such, if the game has to be well played to strike a balance between emerging needs and economics. For example, during the pandemic period, the government banned imports of food products such as quality seeds of potato, maize, onion, and chili. Our supported partnership project had to make a paradigm shift in approach to establish the know-how base and bring in agents, mainly from the government side, which have field presence and could move during the lockdown to facilitate particular partnerships for the production and marketing of seed potatoes and seed chili. A total of 1,200 farmers were involved in these partnerships. We also learned the lesson about the need for seed banks for the strategic food crops, but we learned it the hardest way. Fourth, the typical reluctance of the public financial institutions to lend to agriculture because of the inherent risk in the agricultural sector and the low creditworthiness of most rural producers, even where there is a 100% refinancing facility with IFAD funds. We have developed a couple of financing modalities to overcome this constraint. For example, we put in place 2 value chain financing products, allowing financing institutions to issue bulk loans to companies involved in value chain partnerships for the purpose of extending in-kind working capital loans for producers. The other is also a large loan to cooperative rural banks for on-lending to value chain beneficiaries. Both instruments would hopefully minimize the risk involved in lending. Last, I believe, is the lack of crop and climate insurance service, which has created a sort of reluctance for all partners in the value chain. We have suffered crop losses due to climate shock, like the case of onion seeds and maize, and banks have to drop their cases against poor farmers, given the cost ineffectiveness of handling these cases, but with many reservations against financing such value chains. We have promoted our project to include financial arrangements as a sort of crop insurance in partnership proposals. This is, however, an ad hoc solution, but indeed a policy dialogue is very necessary to elevate this issue to the highest decision-making authorities. Over.
Thank you, Dr. Kotb. Ms. Brenda Barton, let me come to you next. So a lot of discussion on kind of value chain development and other aspects of food security as well has spoken about a food systems approach. Can you discuss why a food systems approach is important in this discussion and how it's particularly important to Sri Lanka?
Thank you very much. It's really great to have this opportunity today. I've been here for 4 years, and there has been much discussion over time about various approaches, a lot around agriculture value chains, but not really about the whole food systems and how value chains fit into this. So I think this is a real rare opportunity for us to all come together to have a collective discussion, to hopefully learn from each other, perhaps come away with some at least initial thinking on joint approaches, maybe even joint programs, but really looking at how collectively we can have the maximum impact. And I really think that the food system approach is an opportunity to do that. We sort of dumb it down and say it's from farmer to fork, or maybe here in Sri Lanka, farmer to table, but it's really looking at a very linear approach to all of the things that ensure that people can grow food and can access sufficient food, but also nutritious food. So I'm very excited to have the opportunity today. One of the things that WFP, of course, and UNICEF, but also, of course, FAO, who's on the phone, have a specific concern about is the situation in Sri Lanka with nutrition. It's not very visible. It is one of the sort of hidden hunger problems in the country. It's a triple burden, as we often call it. It spans undernutrition, overnutrition, and also micronutrient deficiencies. And it really has been unchanged over the last 4 decades when you look at the rates of wasting, which is really when the children are too thin for their height. It's an enormous problem already pre-COVID. So I think we're all trying to grapple with what it means now with the overlay, the COVID pandemic, to the nutritional well-being of families who many, as we know, are being compromised because they don't have the day labor, they don't have the income to put not only nutritious food, but maybe even just the basic foods on the table. So this is a real concern of ours collectively. And I think looking at the agricultural value chains that are so much under pressure right now, the gaps that we had before and what that translates into in terms of people experiencing even more hardship at the household level is really of true concern. So I think, you know, we have many opportunities to look at how agriculture value chains, for example, can be better linked with social safety net programs. One of the things that WFP is engaging in is looking at how farmer communities can be providers of food more directly to the school meals program that Sri Lanka has. There's a fabulous school meals program here. Might there be more opportunities to create a value chain opportunity in that social safety net program, which right now is very, very much under stress because children are not going to school and they are not getting school meals. So perhaps I'll just stop there, but to say how relevant and timely this is, and the panelists at WFP and the other agencies will speak, of course, much more in depth and with more technical expertise.
Thank you, Ms. Barton. You spoke about some of the broader challenges that we have in Sri Lanka in regards to the food systems approach, particularly now with the pandemic. I'm sure there has been a lot of disruption that has taken place with this sort of approach, and broadly speaking in the country overall. What measures has WFP, if you can speak, particularly to those measures that WFP has taken in regards to trying building the resilience of the broader value chain or the food systems approach in Sri Lanka?
Yes, thank you. I think we've all been looking at how to kind of reprogram what we have right now, as well as look at where the gaps are and what we can literally bring to the table to try to address them. So WFP already had a program supporting the government to build the capacity of smallholder farmers in 5 districts, really looking at the farmers that are the most shock and vulnerable to shocks, and how we can have them have better access to commercial markets. And many agencies that are on the line today are doing the same work for maybe different outcomes, but many of us are involved in this broader agriculture value chain work. So what we've done is to try to look at how to, again, have more home gardening in this moment of COVID context, but also to look at how to augment more nutrition sensitive approaches. It was already a priority, but now even more so. And really, to just try to amplify and magnify the kinds of outcomes that these farmers can have while paying close attention to the impact of the crisis on their ability to feed their families. I think understanding the underbelly of what is happening in this country through market monitoring and through really looking at the pressures on the food system and the value chain is extremely important for government, for policy making, and whatnot. Another area, and I think we're all kind of looking out our windows today and seeing the rains and knowing what's been happening up in the north with the threat of the cyclone. A big part of the value chain work is protecting the climate, the climate shocks that happen to the country and really the communities that get hit by that, and emergency preparedness. And building the resilience of those communities is a big part of what we're doing, and we've been supporting the DMC in the lead up to this weather system that we knew was coming. It's not a matter in Sri Lanka of if, it's a matter of when. We know it's on the number 6 of the most climate shock affected countries in the world. But again, going back to smallholder farmers and what happens to them, they can lose, of course, their livelihoods from one day to the next. And so we've been doing things that looking at, how they could have alternate incomes, alternate livelihoods if they do lose their incomes. At the same time, looking at how they can better prepare. It can be drought and they don't have water. And therefore, what happens in that case? So small harvesting water systems and tank rehabilitation and that whole body of work that, again, many of the partners on the call today are doing. So these are a couple of their approaches. And I'd also like to mention about one of the government's really important social safety nets, which again, everyone in Sri Lanka, I think, has heard about Triposha. It's a really important corn soya-based product that the government gives to pregnant and lactating mothers and to children that are not growing to their full height and weight. And that program has been very much under stress because of the lack of maize in the country. Now the government is incentivizing right now more maize production in order to fill that, while there is an import ban for that product. So these are all things that we need to work and support the government on, and work with each other to make sure that these safety net programs that are more critical now really than ever, can go forward and can continue to bolster. The other thing, and I'll just close here, is that WFP has been working a lot with the private sector. We really believe that we're one agency, we're all, doing our part, but it's just one piece. The private sector has a huge role to play in food security and the food systems and agriculture value chains. And I see Rizvi's on the phone, and we've worked together in the past in different initiatives. So last May, WFP spearheaded the Sun Business Network, and if there are any private sector partners on the group today that are not part of that, we welcome you, because it is a forum for private sector entities and UN agencies and NGOs and government to come together and to look at many of the issues that are preventing perhaps having safe and affordable food available to people. It can be marketing, it can be, again, value chain issues. So it's really turned into quite a robust group, and it's something we really believe a lot in. So I'll perhaps close there, but I'm looking forward to hearing the discussions today and answering any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barton. And I think if I were to understand you correctly, I think what has happened is with the pandemic, it has exacerbated a lot of the weaknesses we already have in the country pre-COVID. And now we need to kind of address the exacerbation as well as some of the structural issues that you have identified earlier.
Thank you. Yes.
Let me move on to Dr. Xuebing Sun next. Dr. Sun, how would you consider food system transformation overall, and what is its importance to Sri Lanka?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon. Greetings from Xuebing Sun from FAO. It's really a great pleasure to be here with all of you to discuss about this exciting topic about the sustainable food value chain and the need for transforming the existing food system. Actually, food systems around the world are already changing. As you all may know, that urbanization and income growth are changing food demands, visible in increased demand for vegetables, fruits, meats, and dairy products, as well as processed foods. All the production of these food items is more resource intensive, and the change in dietary preference is increasing pressure on already limited and depleted natural resources. Urbanization also requires food to be easily stored and transported. The disruption resulting from COVID-19 crisis has highlighted many of the fragilities of the contemporary food systems. Challenges including accessing food, nutritious food, at affordable prices when movement is restricted and markets are closed, and the vulnerability of the employees in terms of health and income across the food system is increased. COVID-19 pandemic has also highlighted the vulnerability in nations dependent on imports of food and agricultural inputs, prompting renewed look at the increasing shorter value chains to increase market flexibility and predictability, and to help producers to prevent losses. The pandemic has also sharpened the focus on many contemporary issues such as climate change, food fraud, and the digitalization of the food systems, each with potentially significant implication for the safety of food. However, disruption to the food systems also create opportunities to drive long-term transformation. The crisis has shown how quickly many parts of the food system has been able to respond. As we observed, some of the fundamental long-term challenges to the sustainability of the food system still need to be overcome and factored into response and recovery plans. Many food systems are already falling short of the aspiration of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Poverty and hunger remains entrenched, while obesity with its associated health and economic cost is rising. Food system contributes significantly to the greenhouse gas emission and has been a key driver of land use change and biodiversity loss. So in turn, they are significantly affected by the climate change itself. So in summary, I think the urgency of the food system transformation is now infutable, and the food system transformation is a must. So FAO is responding to the urgent needs for supporting the food system transformation.
Thank you, Dr. Sun.
Here. Yeah.
Yes, so I was about to ask you the follow-up in regards to what measures the FAO has taken with trying to develop food system transformation and making it much more sustainable, particularly in light of, as you rightly pointed out, trying to achieve the SDGs going forward.
Thank you. Overall, FAO works towards addressing issues relating to sustainable structural transformation of the food systems and the associated agriculture and the agribusiness transition in a comprehensive manner. FAO's strategy aims to catalyze the transformation to the food system that are resilient to shocks, ensuring individual health and well-being, promote inclusion and improve environmental and economic sustainability by increasing efficiency and reducing waste. FAO's action will not exclusively support actors in the middle of the food chain, but we will recognize the catalytic role, the multiple players that they can play in ensuring that interventions throughout the value chain are coordinated and combined for the transformative impact. And in Sri Lanka and Maldives, FAO's support to food system transformation has been structured to support improvement of the institutional and policy environment to foster coordination and coherence. FAO technical assistance may include, but not limited to, the following 4 thematic areas. First, innovation for increased efficiency, inclusiveness, and the resilience of the food supply chains. And secondly, is to ensure the food safety and the nutritional quality of the diets. Thirdly, reduce the food loss and the waste. Last but not least, fostering investment in the green recovery of the food value chain to support the transformation towards more resilient and sustainable food system. And internal within FAO system, in order to realize these objectives, FAO in Sri Lanka and Maldives has transformed its country program into 4 thematic portfolios, which will enable FAO representation in Sri Lanka and Maldives to apply programmatic approach to strategic planning, programming, advisory, and analytical services delivery. These 4 portfolios include, firstly, sustainable agriculture. To promote sustainable agriculture through innovation, connectivity, and accessibility, including digital agriculture, strengthening agriculture extension system, and the seed production, and supporting smallholder farmers transformation. Number 2, food safety and nutrition. To increase the contribution of the food system to food and nutrition security and the income generation. Number 3, climate change aims to enhance the resilience of people, communities, and the ecosystems to the impact of climate change. Number 4, the natural resources management and environment. To promotion of the nature-based solutions for wise use of natural resources and conserving the ecosystems. In the following 2 sessions, my colleagues from FAO country office, our regional office, will give you more details as to what has been implemented in terms of supporting Sri Lanka in sustainable food system through promotion of improvement of the agriculture extension system and the seed production, and also our strategic approach in promoting digital agriculture solutions. And for FAO, and with our comparative advantages as a specialized agency in food and agriculture, FAO will further strengthen its partnerships with a range of key food system stakeholders at the global, regional, and the national and the subnational level, fostering the national institutional innovations required to support sustainable food system development. And FAO is fully committed to promote one UN approach in supporting the transition to a more resilient and sustainable food systems in Sri Lanka and the Maldives. And actually, FAO is also furthering its strategic partnership with government, sister UN agencies, development partners, international financial institutions, and other financial service providers, civil society groups, business and scientific institutions for accelerating the green and the resilient recovery and transformation of agriculture and food systems.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Sang. We have only around 5 more minutes left, so that I hopefully will be for about 2 questions that have come through the chat, and I'll open the both questions up to all 3 panelists, and whomever wants to intervene can give their opinion. So one of the questions that we have, and one of the points that were made by all 3 panelists, was also about food security, and particularly in regards to urban food security. So one of the questions that has come is urban agriculture one of the options that we need to, in Sri Lanka, that we need to pursue? And what sort of challenges might we face in terms, if that is to be pursued? So anyone, any of the 3?
I think I think this one has your name on it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Dr. Soon. So this is based on FAO report, the question is. So I'll let you answer that in that case.
Yeah, I think urban, thank you so much for the question. It's a very good question. And also it's a very difficult question to answer in a short time. But in my view, the urban food system is playing an imperative role in securing the overall food safety and the food security matters. 2 aspects. One is from production and the supply end. I think urban food system, including urban home gardening initiative, will play a supplementary role to the traditional agricultural production in the field. Secondly, I think from consumption side and food waste prevention reduction side, urban food system can play a very important role in supporting the country's efforts in securing food security through change of the consumption behavior and the reduction of the food waste. But obviously, institutional strengthening efforts and the policy, enabling policy, environment, incentives must be put in place so that we can, make the food system, urban food system, more effective.
Sure. We have time for one more question, and I want to assure everyone on this call that once we move on to the next subsequent panel discussions, you can discuss these in much further detail. So last question is, and there are quite a few questions on this broader issue, is with regards to agricultural subsidies. So the agriculture sector is one of the highest subsidized sectors in Sri Lanka, and yet it is considered one of the least productive sectors in Sri Lanka as well. What are we getting wrong here, and how do we address it? Brenda, you're muted.
Sorry. I'm going to pop in and give Soon a moment to think, because again, unfortunately, this is an FAO question, at least from the WP side, because we're dealing more at the other end of things. But I did want to just chime in quickly on the previous question, which is on the urban situation. WP supported the Medical Research Institute, MRI, to do a study. This was pre-COVID, of urban food security, and it was the first one that was done. And we'd be happy to share that outcome with the group here, because I do think it's a really good question, and it has exposed the need for gardens and other types of urban agriculture, which is, I think, becoming quite fashionable, but it's also necessary. But it really showed that that in the urban settlements, the difficulty that even on normal times that people had, the fact that they were buying food, not for 4 or 5 days, they were buying it sort of every day. And that was, again, people that had already before they have jobs, many of those people have lost jobs, and the kinds of the quality of the food that they were eating was shown to be very poor. So I think this is a very particular question also to our group going away from this is how can we enhance urban food security? And it's something just yesterday in a regional meeting that the WFP regional Asia directors had, we posed to ourselves. And so I hope that this is a catalyst, this meeting today, to others who are interested in that topic to come together afterward. Thanks. Over to Sun for the tough question on subsidies.
I think, Brenda, I'd like to chip in here just for the subsidy question, because actually I think it would be, let's try to think and be pragmatic about how we really can alleviate subsidy to agriculture inputs, subsidize access to finance, subsidize access to support for business development, engagement in value chain, and importantly, subsidize only the common facilities that would help the farmers to produce and to market, instead of subsidizing specific inputs like fertilizers, like seeds and so on. Why don't you start to think about subsidizing the access to finance? Over.
Thank you.
Dr. Thank you. Actually, FAO has not been, working the subsidy issue in Sri Lanka. Just kind of, but I would like to share with you some of my views, which I consolidated from my early experiences with UNDP in dealing with agricultural financing related matters. Subsidy can be seen as, incentives or disincentives according to the stage of the agricultural development. And if the agriculture development is in a early stage, as in a let's say the mountain climbing stage, certain level of subsidy could be very helpful, for ensuring the benefit of agricultural sector through promoting production and the sales of the agro products. But in general, from agricultural economics perspective, a subsidy is not seen as very good mechanism. If you look at the agricultural sector with a long-term perspective, as Tarek rightly mentioned, rather than subsidizing agro inputs, our experience has been that transforming the subsidy to investment incentives. Rather than subsidizing certain types of agro inputs, for instance, fertilizers or pesticides or so on and so forth. Another way is whether whom should be subsidized, the producers or the agro suppliers or the dealers. So there are a lot of tactic policy instruments which can be used for different stages of subsidy or which is associated with the different stages of agricultural development. What is also useful is that when you put subsidy on the agricultural sector, you should also, apart from transforming the subsidy to investment incentives, should also think about the phase-out strategy for the subsidy system. In the end, transforming the subsidy from the form of subsidization to the investment would be the best choice. But that need a lot of changes as to the current institutional arrangements and the way the farmers have been organized for the production and for the sales purposes. So in general, policy incentives, policy direction will be very important. And I do think that the policy process need to, to be designed or to be improved according to the current domestic status of the agricultural sector and also the external environment where the agricultural sector of certain country is operating. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sun, and thank you very much, Dr. Kotb and Ms. Barton, for your valuable interventions and insights. Hopefully this set up the platform for a deeper dive into some of these issues. I'm extremely sorry that I was unable to ask everyone's questions given the short space of time. However, you can discuss these issues, ask these questions from subsequent panelists as well. And I can see Chaturga is now on the call and ready to take over from me. So thank you very much once again to Dr. Tarek Kotb of IFAD, Dr. Xuebing Sun of FAO, and Ms. Brenda Barton of WFP. Thank you very much for your contributions, and thank you very much, everyone.